takes a minute. Okay, we're live.
Okay, I'll call us to order at 5:02. And any modifications or additions to the agenda?
President Everett, there are none from staff.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
Yeah, we have Dan Spatz has just joined the meeting and he's here to provide public comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. Dan Spatz here from Columbia Gorge Community College, Community Outreach Director, and thank you for the opportunity. Just to let you should have seen a request, our request for a letter of support regarding our proposal to the Federal Aviation Administration in support of aviation technology training. This is a program we hope to start this fall. And specifically, this is a request for funding to what's called Section 625 of the FAA, which would allow us to provide some equipment and bring on some scholarships, other things in support of aviation technology training at the college. And I would welcome any questions.
Well, I don't see anybody coming on, Dan, but I think we are in support and particularly support of the education.
Thank you very much. And I should say it is a pleasure working with Ann and all of you. Ann connected us with Hood River Soaring on the same topic. And we're actually writing letters of support for each other's projects. They are applying to a related program, also Section 625. In their case, it's flight instruction, flight training. Ours is aviation maintenance. So they're complementary.
Yes, and what we can do to reach our young people, that's all good.
Thank you, sir. That's it for me then.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
That takes us to the consent agenda, which is just approve the minutes. So unless there's any input to or edits or errors to the minutes, can I get a motion?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Chair.
Well, then I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Merriweather, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Strike aye.
Chapman, aye.
Everett, aye. Passes. Informational reports, our discussion. Would anybody like to discuss either of the informational reports?
Commissioner, I've got a couple of new items that didn't make it into the meeting in time, if I could.
Yeah, please step up.
Okay, we finally broke the ice with the Yakima Nation. I was invited to speak to their spring fishers meeting, which was canceled last year. So they're going to give us 15 minutes on their agenda to bring the bridge project to them.
That's great news.
There's currently a survey that's active, and there's notices at the various fishing sites in the Mid-Columbia. So this is a really good opportunity and a sign that maybe everybody's getting a little bit more used to Zoom meetings. Another thing I wanted to confirm based upon the special session last week on the bridge replacement strategy was just that we should be doing that same presentation for the bi-state working group as quickly as possible. And I think we've got a pretty big agenda for them that includes the AE design and the governance and some of the other technical issues. But I think that it will be relatively easy to prepare for a redux of that presentation. So I'll see if I can't actually get that teed up in the next week or so for the bi-state working group, and then we can do the more technical meeting, 2 weeks after that. So just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly about that presentation we heard last week.
Now, that was my understanding as well, Kevin, that we try and get that repeated, although I note in your bridge replacement update that there's congressional representation at the next bi-state work group.
Yeah, we might be able to earmark 10 minutes so that Senator King and Senator Thompson, Representative Williams can give the working group an update. And I don't think that will, set us back too much on that presentation.
Okay.
And then one other item that I want to bring to your attention, we're continuing to struggle with the land use report in the supplemental draft EIS. And if you recall, the South Bridge approach, really has significant impacts on the port's operations, specifically the existing administrative building and the maintenance shop. I mean, it's going to take away probably a third to a half of the work yard back there. And so, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be helpful next meeting just to give a real brief summary of the language that's that's going in the supplemental draft EIS. I don't want it to be really long, but just I think it's critical that you're aware of the issues and that you understand what's going into the final EIS and what the mitigation opportunities are, and make sure that we account for everything and that you're aware of what's going into the report regarding our operations.
Yeah, Kevin, certainly we want to be educated on what impact the bridge landing on the South Shore is going to have, because that also speaks directly to where we're going to need to be compensated or made whole some way. I don't know when the timing's appropriate.
I think it should be sooner than later, just so you know what's going in that report, and because this is the time to make any adjustments, and so I think that this is one that hits close to home. For instance, the new pathway would actually be utilizing the marina parking lot for access to the administration building, assuming that the administration building stayed where it was. So I think that, there is mitigation language, but it may not be clear enough about, if need be, that a new administrative building or new maintenance facility be acquired or mitigated, and that the port be made whole for the loss of the use of that land.
Well, then, yeah, if you think it's time for us to get updated, then let's do it.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I'll try to keep the actual presentation pretty brief and just let you see what we're putting in there. We've got a meeting with WSP, who's actually authoring that chapter, on Monday, just to make sure that we can really try to clarify where we see the issues are, and then we can certainly present that to you at the next meeting.
Yes, and thanks for being proactive about getting that in front of us timely.
Great, and then so other than that, that's all I've got for this bridge update.
Okay. Well, that will do for informational reports, presentations, and discussions. Property leasing policy.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to get back to you and give you a status on the lease policy that was implemented in 2019 and show you how that's working, and show you the additional work that still needs to be done. So if you look at the memo, a couple big takeaways from this is, number one, we're still on track to be fully implemented by 2024. Number two, that net increase in cost recovery for us is $130,000 annually. So that's what the port's bringing in additionally to what we were before implementing the strategy. And that's a combination of both increased rents, changing the structure of the lease. So now we include common areas in their leasable square footage. And then also increasing the additional rent to really fully cover our operating costs. So those are kind of the three big things that the new lease policy and structure of the lease allowed us to implement. So I just wanted to take a look at the spreadsheet, if you would, Genevieve, just a couple down. I included the lease policy actually for you to look at too, just so you could remind yourselves of what the actual verbiage of that was. So this is my big sort of cumbersome spreadsheet that shows all of the industrial building tenants. So this doesn't include the airport tenants, although those are also being implemented into the new lease policy. And this just kind of shows you a quick snapshot of where we're at. So the green highlighted tenants are those that have been shifted onto the new lease structure. And then the yellow are those whose leases are going to come before you in final form on the 16th. If you can scroll to the bottom quickly for me, Genevieve, that'd be great. So as you see sort of at the bottom, it's a little bit of a roll up. Even through the pandemic, our vacancy rates in May are going to be down to 4%, which is really, really good. And if you can scroll over to the right for me. Thank you. And then this is sort of a roll up of the annual revenue increases. And this change is different from the 130,000 I quoted you earlier, because this actually includes taxes. In the past, the port had billed taxes out separately, and now those tax payments are included in the monthly additional rent. So even minus the taxes, we're still netting around an estimated 130,000 additional a year. Now, Fred and his team are going to be looking into that more closely during the budget process. But for my rough estimations, that's about what we're gaining in revenue based on this structure. Additionally, we've updated all of our insurance clauses. We've cleaned up some of our other clauses in the lease, and Jerry and his team continue to tweak the lease structure as we move forward through every tenant. Sometimes when we're negotiating with a tenant there, they come up with a better way to word a clause that works for the port better. And so we adopt that as it comes along and update the lease form. So that's all I had tonight. I just wanted to give you that update. It's going pretty dang well, I would say. So if there's any questions, I can answer those for you now.
And one question on the bottom, it is going very well. It's going exceptionally well. It's nice to see it, come to fruit over lots of multiple year effort.
Mhm.
But on the bottom where we're looking at the increase, is that cumulative going across?
No.
So at the end of 2024,
Mhm.
what's our total increase
No.
when we're fully implemented?
Spreadsheet open, so I can't calculate that for you right away.
But would I add all those going across to arrive at that?
Yeah, it's about 300,000, which is sort of what we thought in the beginning.
Yeah, okay.
Again, though, that includes the tax payments, so you got to reduce that.
Yeah, back that up. All right. Yeah,
Again,
so,
and this is a real rough estimate. This is just using my numbers. So Fred and his team have all the details and they can get into that over the budget season.
okay. Yeah, then, thanks.
Thank you. That's it. If there's no more questions.
Nobody's got their mute off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Michael, the executive director's report.
Yeah, thanks. Just some highlights. Big appreciation for the work session, all the work that staff did in preparing for it, and the commissioners for giving 3 hours to it. I did want to suggest that we have a kind of a recap of it at a future meeting where we can understand more specifically what the commission as a whole is willing to and ready to support. This is something I've talked to Commissioner Everett about. And what I would like to do is meet individually with each commissioner to talk a little bit more detail about the strategy as they heard it, their thoughts, ideas looking ahead. Because I think it is important for, and also I should say input from the working group, but I think it's important for us as staff and for the commission to have a sort of consensus around either these strategic objectives or how they might be modified to make them acceptable. So for commissioners, I'll be reaching out to have a chance to talk to you about it and sort of debrief about the work session and talk about your thoughts on the strategy as it was presented. Just a couple of other items. The advocacy group has its virtual Gorgeous Night in Salem and Olympia, and I'd encourage any commissioner to attend or participate. You have to register to do so, but really terrific video that was produced summarizing the issues in the gorge and the attributes of the gorge, and I'm anxiously looking forward to participating in that. The support letter that Mr. Spots brought up, it's attached to my report. I would ask for either any discussion or, if not, a consensus approval to go ahead and sign this and get it out to Mr. Dixon at the FAA. So I think it's just consensus matter, but if perhaps commissioners could thumbs up or
We're on Zoom. Why don't everybody weigh in? I'll
So
be in favor. Everett in favor.
Chapman's full support.
Meriwether's in support.
Shepherd as well.
Thumbs up, guys. Good job.
All right, thank you. I wanted to just give a big thanks to our facilities staff, especially Steve and Ryan. There's a couple of photos of that beam underneath the cruise ship dock. It's pretty apparent that that beam needed to be replaced. So not to shock you, but we just like to think our timing was excellent for replacement of that. And that was something that our guys self-performed, and it was tricky. It's a heavy beam. It had to be in sections. They had to pre-stage. You can see the platform there. So we're now fully ready for the summer and for the full complement of concessionaires there. So a big thank you to them. And then I just want to make sure that there's an opportunity for any questions or concerns about the short-term use agreement we have with James Dean Construction on Lot 1. It's essentially pre-staging gravel for a large job they have in the Upper Valley before the weight limit reduction is implemented, and that starts tomorrow. So effectively, their gravel, or most of it, is now on this side of the river. They don't have to worry about the weight reduction. We have heard or received some questions from a local reporter about that and about other steps we're taking to accommodate contractors or shippers that have an issue or facing an issue with the weight reduction. The only other one we're really active with is you've already heard about, which is the sort of temporary concrete plant up at the lower mill.
Well, Michael, I have a question about something else. I'll just ask you at the same time, but I'll give you a comment about that, as my office is probably the closest person every day to where they're putting that fill. It's right across the street from my office. I'm glad you're allowing them to do that. I have no problem with it. They had, I don't know why anybody had a problem with it. I certainly have none as a next door neighbor, and I'm glad we're allowing them to do that.
Great, good to hear.
I do have the question, if I could change the topic, is on your director's report on the first page at the bottom of it. There's a notation that the County Board of Commissioners approved a list of strategy projects.
Yeah.
Lot 1 came in at number 3 and Bridge came in at number 10. That doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I was curious if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so this is the annual SEDS list, Community Economic Development Strategy. It's really a creature of the Economic Development Administration, which flows through MCED. So every year we update this list, and you have to look at it as, first and foremost, you want to be on the list. Because if you're on the list, that has cachet. You have standing with the EDA if you're seeking a grant request from the Economic Development Administration. It's not so important where you are on the list, except for one thing, which is if tactically anybody is seeking a grant of any sort, it's net positive to be high on the list, and it's net best to be number one on the list. But it's an annual sort of tactical decision: who's going after a grant, who needs to say we're number one. We were number one last year because we knew we were going after the build grant, and arguably that helped to say we're number one in Hood River County. We're not going after the same kind of federal grant in this year, so it was a lot less important to be number one. Whereas for the Lot 1 Anchor Way, we are specifically going after an immediate opportunity fund grant through ODOT and another $500,000 grant from the EDA, which we received $500,000 for the Waterfront Business Park about 10 years ago. So there's a reason why we want to be in top 3 for one, and why it doesn't matter for the bridge this year.
All right, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Michael, can I just add something to that? Last year, when we were number one on the Oregon side, we didn't even register on the Washington side. So even though we're down the list a little bit this year, guess what? This year, we're actually on the Washington list. So now we got the bridge on both lists, which I think is a thumbs up.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Good point. Finally, I just want
Hey,
to.
Michael,
Yeah.
Michael, in regard to Lot 1, James Dean, their use is going to be how long, Mike?
It's not entirely sure. It depends on the duration of their job, but Mr. Dean thinks it will go through the end of April or early May.
Okay. And the reason I ask is that if it gets into the dry season, it may be a problem for shepherds as far as dust. They may have to have some kind of water access to water down the piles.
Yeah, it should be.
Ben may get dust all through his window, his office.
Yeah.
I might be less excited in a couple of months. No, I appreciate that. I do think we should extend, every courtesy to these guys that are trying to save a few dollars and do their job. And I've got right now no problem with it. If we need to throw down some water, I appreciate that. I think we can do it. But I'm glad we're supporting them. Yeah.
The wind blows the other way, so it'll blow it away from you.
True. So last, just pointing out that the signage is up, really terrific cooperation with WashDOT and ODOT. And that's, I said it already, but as a reminder, tomorrow is the day when officially the weight reduction is in place. We have no means of enforcement. It is something that's important for truckers to know where the limits are and where they can and can't haul their rigs. And but if it comes to it, the enforcement that comes is through the Waymaster and Cascade Locks, and potentially they could set up a jump scale and monitor trucks coming across. That's happened twice before since I've been here, and it lasts about a half a day. But as of tomorrow, we're officially a 64-ton bridge. 32-ton bridge. So that's my report. Lots of work going on. It's an incredibly busy time. We're preparing for budget season. Fred's beginning to get into that. We have transitions occurring and a lot of different work efforts. One thing I forgot to mention was we'll be submitting an application to the Oregon State Marine Board for replacement of the parallel ramps at the launch ramp in the marina. This is the work that builds on what Andy Jansky was doing. And the timing of this was somewhat unexpected when OSMB reminded us that this is the first year of a grant application period, and it closes on March 8th. So next week, we have to have the grant application in. It's somewhere in the order of magnitude of a $250,000 project, a lot of money. And we would be hoping for about a 50% match from OSMB. If you look at those ramps closely, you can see they're concrete encased foam, they're grounding floats. So they're up and down and they hit the concrete, and they're over decades now. And they're broken up. The transition ramp or transition plate is twisted. It's been replaced in the past, and it'll have to be replaced again unless we get to replace the entire, those two ramps. So it's a big effort to put the application together. I think the odds are pretty good that we'll get it. If not, it's not the end of the world. But if we don't hit this grant application deadline, it's tied to the legislative biennium, and it will be effectively 2 years before we could apply again. So that's coming, and we'll wait to hear in a couple months if we get the grant or not. So that concludes my report.
Michael,
thank
I
you.
have one quick question, or maybe a comment for the board and the port to consider is, you know, the bridge meeting that we had on Friday was incredibly informative of the history of things and where we're at. And I think it could be but it was also 3 hours long because we had discussions and everything else. And I'm wondering if, you know, we had the lot one discussion and the history, and is there a way, maybe not right now, because I know that you guys are incredibly taxed right now and maxed out, but this might be something that we want to look to for the future of having these short video archives of here's the history of a project, a long-term project, so that when new commissioners come on, and we're going to have probably 2 new people come on, unless David or John surprises everyone. But that I think those types of short videos would be great, not only for new commissioners coming in, but also just to help educate the general public of here's the history of something that's going on. Here's a 20-minute presentation on it if you wanted to listen to it. And then we can just keep building onto those. Just an idea, throw out there.
I think that's an excellent idea. Every time there's a transition in commissioners, we prepare a briefing binder, and we meet and we tour the properties, but there's a lot of history here, and concentrated history in certain areas, and that would be a really great way to give them that a better, more detailed briefing. I'm looking at our communications manager, Genevieve, and she's nodding her head, so I think you would agree too.
Yeah, I think that's two green lights and 2 consecutive meetings for me to prepare a video production budget in the next for the next fiscal year. So I'll be doing that. It is. I mean, it's a great way to communicate, and it's a great way to get that information usable. So I'll definitely prepare that.
Yeah, and the waterfront use plan belongs in there too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fabulous document that I didn't even know we had, because it was done in 2013 before I came on.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Then commissioner committee reports. We got airport noise work group. Ann, is that you?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I was already on the action items. So the noise work group met on the 28th, and we were able to come up with the final drafts of both the report and the matrix, which is the recommendations from the noise group that are going to be going to the AAC on the 10th, and then coming to you in the form of a final draft report on the 16th. So lots of good work has been done there. A lot of collaboration between the pilot community and the neighbors. And I think that you'll be pleased with the recommendations and where we've landed. There was also, if you recall, a meeting with some of the airport operators, and their input is included in some of the recommendation changes. So that's all I've got.
Yeah, no, good work. Yeah, I'd be interested to see it. It's a long-term effort.
And I think it will continue. I think this will be something that won't ever fully go away, but we'll continue to work on as we move along.
Okay. Any questions for Ann? In that case, the action items. We got the contract with Aaron Fagry.
Okay, that's me again. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly here, just to, at the request of Commissioner Strike, just to remind you what it is this contract is covering. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so if you remember, this is the commercial hangar with 4 separate potential bays. It is located on the north side of the airport where the new improvements were made. We don't have an aerial photo of those new improvements yet. So what you see here, the circle, that's actually all now paved with a building pad, gravelled and ready to go. So if you look at the arrow, that's pointing to an old visual of what could have been built here. And this is very similar to what we're proposing that the port constructs on that site. The inside, the floor plans look something like this. So remember, there was 2 options, and the board decided to go with a larger option, which can house more aircraft or R&D flex space. So that's what we're proposing to build here, and that Mr. Faegre is proposing to design. So if we look at the contract, this is really a design, bidding services, and construction services contract. Genevieve, if you could go to page 62, please, that'll show the scope of work. So Mr. Faegre is a very experienced architect / engineer that's worked on a lot of airport hangar plans and designs and construction. And so he's got a vast amount of experience in this field and with public entities such as ourselves. So we had Mr. Doofman, if you remember, was the third-party counsel that looked in on this this contract, and the contract that you have before you does fit within the recommended design, bid, build structure, which is our traditional contracting structure. So Mr. Faegre would be providing design services, bidding services, and construction services, basically getting us through the entire construction process, and that up to $95,000 covers all of those deliverables for each of those phases. If the board decides to not move forward with construction, then this contract was written in such a way that we can stop the contract after the design phase. Let's say if the board decides, nope, we're not going to move forward this year, then we could terminate that contract after that phase. So with that, if there's no questions, I'd like to call for approval.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
If I could, and we know at this point about what the cost of this hangar development will be, the construction cost?
Yeah, we're estimating around $3 million.
Okay. That's a pretty good price for those services for a $3 million project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought so too.
And do we have potential clients this time?
I'm sorry?
Do we have any potential clients?
Yes, we have one client that's willing to sign an MOU for one of the spaces. They initially wanted 2. And then there's others that are interested. They just want to see if the port's going to move forward before they, sign anything.
And Ann, that one client we're looking at or discussing with, that term of that contract lease would be how long? Is it 5-year with extensions or?
Yeah, it'd be 5-year with renewals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, absent any more questions, can I get a motion?
I move we approve the contract with Aaron Faegre and Associates for design and construction services related to construction of a commercial hangar not to exceed $95,000 plus reasonable reimbursable expenses.
I'll second that, Strike.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And all in favor?
Chapman, aye.
Mayor Weathers, aye.
Shepherd's eye.
Strike.
Everett, aye. Passes.
Thank you.
And then Kevin, we have a contract with David Evans.
Let me unmute there. So yes, this is a contract for hydrographic survey work, both on the surface of the river and also below the surface of the river. So there's 4 different types of data sets that David Evans would be providing. This is being requested by the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, along with the Umatilla tribe. And part of the requirement is for the project to do due diligence on any types of historic resources. And so there's really, there's not a lot of certainty that we'll find anything. There are some old relic pile from the old approach, but we really don't anticipate seeing a whole lot, which is okay, because that means that we still have done the effort to show that we would not be impacting any resources. So one thing I think is really helpful is today we did get confirmation from ODOT and DAP that our approach and WSP's approach to this project is they gave us the thumbs up. As part of that, we will, the geotechnical work, we will actually have an archaeologist on as those bores are coming up from the geotechnical work. There will actually be someone to monitor the material that's being pulled out of the sub-river surface, just to evaluate that, to make sure that there aren't any historic resources that are being impacted. I've been through that process once before in Tillamook Bay, and it went pretty smooth. And really what they're interested in is really that area from the old riverbed to the current riverbed. That's the area where they've got the most amount of interest. Yeah,
They'll pull hollow cores?
Hollow cores?
Yeah, what will the archaeologists look at?
Yeah, so as the boring equipment goes down and comes up, it actually brings up like a 3 to 4 inch core of material.
Yeah.
And at periodic points, as that stuff is coming out, the archaeologists will be sifting through that. I don't think it's probably as exciting as they're probably hoping it will be, but that'll just give additional certainty that we're doing the due diligence to make sure natural or historic resources aren't impacted. Actually, if you go down to the graphic on page 58, I just kind of want to show you where their work is going to be taking place. I think it's widely understood that that area where the yellow and the larger red lines are located, that's the landing for the preliminary preferred alternative and the most likely spot for any type of archaeological findings, because that's where the old riverbed was located. But if you notice, there's 2 red lines that go across the entire river right below that cable area label. And so they will actually run 2 soundings along those lines transiting the river. And that will actually be beneficial, not so much for the archaeological folks, but for the engineering team once it comes on board. So that'll just be another appendix along with the geotechnical work. So we figured, is there, the real cost in this contract is to mobilize and bring all the equipment to Hood River. But once we have it, hey, let's try to maximize it, and it really won't take long for them to do that transit. So another good piece of news is that I noted in the report that they normally ask for 3 weeks to mobilize. A couple of the pieces of equipment are coming from Houston. We're going to actually have that material and that equipment on site next week. So they're going to be able to start the work on, assuming that you approve the contract tonight, they'll be able to start March 9th, 10th, and 11th to get that work done. And we'll be meeting with John's operations crew Friday morning just to facilitate, where the trucks and the trailers and the boat will be located midweek next week. So if you have any other questions or comments, I can certainly answer those.
Kevin, has this scope of services and this proposed process and analysis that's in this contract, has that been reviewed or blessed by the Washington and Oregon Historic Preservation folks? Are they satisfied that this is going to, I guess, achieve the information in a reasonable way that they can have some level of comfort? Obviously, if we hit something significant, it's a different story. But if we were able to do this and show that there are no significant findings there, would they think that this process that we've used would be satisfactory to them?
Absolutely. And in the case of Washington State, that's really where this is being pushed on, is from Washington DAP, which is the equivalent to the Oregon SHPO. And so they've really been the ones wanting to push this, along with the Umatilla. Really didn't have too much interest from Oregon SHPO. And so the findings will be included in the archaeological survey report that's going to be conducted, that will include the findings from that key site on the White Salmon side, the one that had all of the relic items discovered. So this will really fill out that archaeological report. And this is DAP and the Umatilla gave us the thumbs up today with our approach on this. And so I feel really confident that this is going to take care of the issue, aside from running into something that we don't know.
In other words, if we don't do this, no record of decision, probably.
Commissioner, we kind of, I wouldn't say we battled the agencies over the last month, but we realized that we could waste a bunch of more time and not get anywhere, or we could just negotiate a final settlement. And so this, I think, will get us to where we need to be.
And you've done quite a bit of that, Kevin. Thank you. Those WSP has been good at that as well. They've advocated for our interests throughout the whole process.
Well, it's a fine line, and it's really not so much the port's perspective, but it's federal highways and ODOT. I mean, this is the only project we'll probably ever have of this significance. And so we don't really care if we want to be polite and cordial, but we're probably not going to be dealing with DAP at this level very often. But that's not the case for ODOT and federal highways. They have to deal with Washington DAP and the tribes all the time. And so they're the ones that are really pushing for the more measured approach. And so, I feel confident that with ODOT and federal highways working with DAP and the tribes, I think we're in a good spot, because then if for some reason there is some left field request from those agencies, federal highways and ODOT can say, hey, we can keep moving forward even if we don't necessarily get their support.
Mm-hmm. Well, good to know. Yeah. So we need if there's no more questions, we get a motion on the contract.
Yeah, this is Meriwether. I'll move we contract with David Evans and Associates for hydrographic and geophysical survey work related to bridge replacement not to exceed $68,100 plus reasonable reimbursement for expense.
Shepherd will second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And all in favor?
Meriwether, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Okay.
Chapman, aye.
Everett, aye. Passes.
Great, thank you.
Any commission calls? Any commissioner have an issue they'd like to bring up? Well, that's tidy. And so I'll see if I can get this right once in my life. I think we should, at this point, move out of regular session and go into executive session under ORS 192.6602